see you later because we need to go over to the Northern Territory. The opposition leader, Bill Shorten, is in Kakadu.
On the land of the Mirarr people, and I acknowledge the traditional owners and their elders, past and present. I think sometimes in our own country, we can be guilty of taking our country and some of its marvellous features for granted. And for too long, I think that Kakadu has been neglected. Now we have a time of, if not crisis, of great urgency. The mine, Ranger Mine, is coming to the end of its working life. The park has been neglected for too long. The voices of the people here not heard. So today I'm really pleased to announce that if Labor is elected, we will work with the Northern Territory government and we will work with the people who live here and the traditional owners to rescue Kakadu, to rescue Jabiru. We see a bright future. This is, as I said at the opening of my conference, Kakadu is one of the world's great unique gifts. And we have an obligation, the national government responsible for the park, working with the local custodians to uplift, to refresh, if you like, this marvellous national asset. If we don't do the work now, it'll be too late for our kids and our grandkids to see. This is home, this park, to thousands of mammals and reptiles and birds, unique species. The rest of the world want to come and see what happens here. And I want to make it easy for them to do that. I also want to make sure, though, that the locals are at the centre of the decisions which get made. Therefore, I acknowledge the Mirarr people, the work that they've done over years, the work of the Northern Territory governed by Michael Gunner, the work of Warren Snowden, Malandiri McCarthy, who are here with me today, along with Luke Gosling, to put on the national political agenda the need to rescue Kakadu. So I am pleased to announce today that a Labor government, from its very first budget, if elected, will start rolling out a $220 million rescue plan. $100 million for roads, $45 million for asbestos remediation so that people can live here safely. There'll be money for a visitors centre not far from where we meet. Michael Gunner's already come to the party. He's backing in with a promise on power and energy, schools and hospitals. Labor will make sure that we involve local contractors and traditional owners every step along the path of the master plan. Labor's got a vision for the Northern Territory, which of course is more than just Kakadu and Jabiru, but if you want to anchor the Territory's future, tourism is a vital linchpin. Labor understands that when we talk to the traditional owners, when we involve our first Australians, when we involve our local community, when we back in tourism, when we back in local business, there's nothing that we can't do as a nation. We're the only country in the world who's custodian to a whole continent. It's up to us to make sure that we hand on a better deal to our kids and grandkids. And we'll let the rest of the world see a little bit of what we see here. Because that way, we can make sure that we hand on a better deal to those who come after us. I'd now like to invite my friends, the traditional owners, to say some words. And of course then, Michael Gunner, Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. Gentlemen, over to you.
Hello everyone. This is fantastic news for Jabiru and Kakadu. We are very proud of our country. It is very special and we have a lot to share with visitors. We want to share our country with visitors. We can do this in a way that benefits everybody. We need to protect the country. Kakadu is more than beautiful as landscape and rock art. Aboriginal culture is alive and very deep. We have a new way with tourists using new technology in the new visitor center. That hasn't really been done yet. It's something new and exciting. We are also excited at the Breeding Resource Center. This is a place for all the clans in Kakadu to have office and meeting space. There will be a language center, place to meet business people and universities and to really develop Australian business and jobs. This is for all the clans, not just us Mirarr. We used to have a lot more people visiting Kakadu. We can have more people come in if we plan it properly. all the building plans need to be part of the planning for tourism and for roads. We can't leave that to the Board of Management anymore. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to, thank the Liberal Party for supporting Jabiru. Yeah. Oh, Labour Party, sorry. just ignore that. Yeah, I'd like to thank them for supporting us. I believe that this will have great benefit for our young ones for the near future to come. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Well done, Michael.
This is a sensational day for the Territory, for Jabiru and for Kakadu. We now have a guarantee that after the next federal election, hundreds of millions of dollars will be invested into Kakadu National Park. We know how important Kakadu is for driving international visitor numbers, for creating local jobs. The best thing about today's announcement, the best thing about Bill's plan, backed by Warren Snowden, backed by Luke Gosling, backed by Malarndirri McCarthy, the best thing about Bill's plan is it recognises the urgency of action. Under Bill Shorten, under a federal Labor government, this money will flow from that first budget, in that first term, in that first 4 years. It is critical that we act, and we act now. We know that the Territory is facing tough economic times, and it requires those big in the Northern Territory. We get that from Bill, and we get that from our local federal members in Warren, Luke and Malarndirri. We recognise the urgency of action as a Territory. We decided last term to walk away from negotiations around the future of Jabiru. And when you pair that with the neglect from the current Australian government, that is a crippling decision for the Territory economy. We acted, we came back to the table, we had our first community backing them, that we'll work with the Gundjeihmi about their vision here for Kakadu and for Jabiru, and we have backed them, we have backed locals, we have backed traditional owners, we have backed the Gundjeihmi Aboriginal Corporation. We provided that 5-year service guarantee around education and health. We provided that guarantee around power and water. Those basics that people should know that the government is there for them on. And recognising the importance of action, in a month's time, we'll be opening the Jabiru Futures office here in Jabiru, a one-stop shop about the future of both the park and what's happening here in Jabiru for locals, for businesses who are looking to invest, so that we can plan properly for the future. We're doing all this in partnership with the traditional owners, because that's the way it should be here on Mirror Country, the way it should be here through the park, and all those traditional owner groups, which is one reason why we've taken that advice from the Gundjeihmi around the Binning Resource Centre, a place here in Jabiru that looks after all those traditional owners, all those people through the entire park. Recognise we've got to work together to deliver this. So the best thing about today's announcement, the best thing is that we now know that under Bill Shorten and a federal Labor government, this will happen immediately from that first budget, and that's what the Territory needs to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
On my 16th visit to the Northern Territory since I became opposition leader, are there any questions?
Surprised the Prime Minister tried to rush in yesterday.
Well, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so good start to the year. Listen, in all seriousness, if Mr Morrison wants to borrow some of our ideas, that's fine by me. I mean, getting up 24 hours and wanting to help pull a quick, shifty manoeuvre, it is actually a bit of what happens in politics. But what I want to do is I don't worry about the politics. I worry about the ideas. How good is it for the top end? How good is it for Michael Gunner, who's had to argue with the Libs in Canberra? How good is it for the people here as the mine closes? How good is it for the traditional owners? Both sides of Australian politics are saying rescuing Kakadu is a priority. Now, of course, the devil's always in the detail. I did notice that the government in their rush has actually said that they'll roll out their promise over 10 years. Kakadu doesn't have 10 years to wait. The people who are working here with the closing of the mine don't have 10 years to wait. That's why our package is front-end loaded to put up straight. What we're going to do is put more of the money we're promising in our first couple of years from our first budget, because Kakadu and Jabiru need rescuing now, not in 10 years' time. The other thing is our proposal, and it's courtesy of the Mirror people, the Northern Territory government, the local community, it is just simply more detailed. This is just a fact. It's not me blowing our own trumpets. This is Labor's proposal shows the homework that's happened over a long period of time. I flagged it when the Northern Territory business community came down to Canberra last year. We saw Kakadu as a driving force for tourism in the Territory. So we're putting more money into roads, we're putting more money into asbestos remediation of the houses in the local community, and we're certainly going to make sure that we put a strong and solid investment in environmental management, because that's as important as some of the physical infrastructure.
Is that roads infrastructure funding going to ensure that places like gym pools and swim pools can be accessed 365 days?
I'll get Warren to go through the detail. In our press release, we list the specifics of the 4 major roads which we're going to work on. We do want to improve access to some of these falls. There's some marvellous plunge pools. There's some great places to visit. But the nature of these roads is even if we drive. Anyway, I'll get Warren to talk about it.
A long while. We'd hope to be able to get it accessed for 12 months, but it's unlikely that'll happen in some cases. But what we are doing is providing the capacity for as much access all year round as we possibly can. The vagaries of the weather here, everyone knows it. It won't matter how much build-up you do on some of these roads, it won't stop flooding. So we've got to be very careful about making sure that the roads are safe and are able to be used, and in consultation with the binning and the park management, that'll be determining when and if these roads may close into the future. But it's our hope, our sincere hope, that this investment will provide almost 12, if we possibly can, 12 months access.
Thank you.
What's going to be the major commitment from Labor heading into the federal election for the Northern Territory?
No, we'll have other policies to outline. For what it's worth, let me remind you though of what we've already promised Territorians. First of all, we're going to properly fund hospitals. So we're going to reverse cuts which have been made. That's pretty important. We're going to unfreeze the Medicare rebates. Medicare rebates, it's a sort of fancy way of saying it's the patient rebate. So when the Liberals are in power, and this is now my 6th year of opposition, so they've been doing this for 6 years, when they freeze the Medicare payment to the GP, what they're actually doing is freezing the amount of money the mum or dad claim when they go and see the doctor and take the kids. So what it's doing is putting greater pressure on the hip pocket of Northern Territorians. We're going to invest in more renewable energy. We see that as having opportunities for the Territory. We're certainly going to make it easier for Territorians to go to university by uncapping places at university. So we've already announced some pretty positive policies, and of course, please don't forget that if you're a working couple in this country and you earn maybe one partner earns $60,000, the other person earns $70,000, in the first 3 years under a Labor government, you're going to get back nearly $6,000 as a family in tax refunds. So we're going to get wages moving. We're going to make sure you can afford to take your parents or your kids to the doctor, more money for schools and unis and technical training. We're going to spend more money locally. We're going to make sure local contractors access it. But we've got a lot more to say about the Northern Territory, and hats off to Michael that Labor nationally is listening to him, and we've got some good policies which will work in consultation with local communities. Ultimately, the best thing that we can do in the Territory is attract more people here, and that's what we're interested in.
Mr. Shorten, are you aware of the budget crisis the NT government's dealing with at the moment, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that?
Well, we're very lucky today to actually have the man who's running the NT government. I'm running for Prime Minister. But what I promised the Northern Territory is we're not going to neglect Kakadu. We're not going to leave Jabiru to work it out on their own. We're not going to leave Michael Gunner to have to deal with the reckless spending of his profligate CLP predecessors who left the books of the Territory in a shocking situation. So we are going to be partners to the Territory in schools, in university, in training the apprentices, in making sure that we've got the proper investment in our healthcare system and our hospitals. But as I said, we've got the Chief Minister here, so I'm sure he's happy to deal and talk about the legacy which a lazy, divided CLP government in the Territory left Territorians. And of course, I'm happy to talk further about how the federal government has presided over a slowing economy nationally. I mean, when you take out export of mining and commodities overseas, the national economy is not pretty. If you take out the number of public service jobs that have been created, the rate of jobs growth in recent months in the private sector, not pretty. If you look at the fact that in the southeast part of Australia, we see housing prices falling under this government, in part because the regulators and the banks haven't been able to do their job properly. It's not pretty. When you look at wages growth, stagnant. I mean, everywhere you go in Australia, the most common sentence you hear over the barbecue is, everything's going up except my wages. But anyway, you didn't ask me about the national economy. I'll hand over to Michael.
We know that the Territory is going through tough economic times at the moment. We've got to do everything we can to create local jobs. We have to have that plan that we're putting in place around those post-IMPEX days. Now, the CLP last term sold everything, spent everything, and left $900 million deficit. That's the exact opposite of what you do if you want to have a plan in place for the post-IMPEX period. So that's left us a difficult rope to walk. But the things that we can expect from Australian government that cares about Territorians is that you recognise the importance of things like health. Now, Bill touched on health just before. The current Australian government walked away from a deal around 50-50 funding around our hospitals, and they're looking at place a cap on activity-based funding and make that retrospective. Those are crippling decisions for the Territory budget when it comes to how we manage health here in the Northern Territory. You need an Australian government that understands the basics, understands the importance of investing back into health, and that's what we'll get under a Bill Shorten Labor government. As a Territory, we're doing everything we can to keep creating those local jobs, recognising it's important to cushion the blow post-IMPEX, and we'll do all that in these tough budget times. But we want and need a government who understands in Canberra the importance of the Territory, the importance of acting now, and the importance of investing in the right things, and we'll get that under a Bill Shorten Labor government.
The CLP delivered 2 budget surpluses in 4 years in power and left a similar amount of debt that they were left by the Henderson government. You can't seriously stand here, can you, and blame 4 years of the CLP for the budget crisis that your government's in.
It sets the context for what we're doing right now. So IMPEX winding down was not breaking news, it's something that you had to plan for. The CLP going to the last election got desperate. They sold everything, spent everything, and left the $900 million deficit. There was no money in the bank for that important area that you need to do when something winds down, which is that stimulus funding to create those jobs to soften the blow. So we've had to walk this tightrope about putting money into stimulus projects to create those local jobs, from the $100 million into public housing to the turbocharging tourism to other stimulus projects to cushion that blow. We've had to do all that based off the fact that CLP had no plan in place for post-IMPEX. So we've had to put our economic plan in place through tough budget times. We're going to make those tough decisions. We've made those tough decisions. The next budget will be a difficult one, a challenging one, but we're going to make it knowing that Territorians are doing it tough and they need local jobs, and that's our priority as a government.
Scott Morrison basically ruled out any prospect of a federal bailout from a Liberal government. Will you be asking a Labor government for a bailout?
So for me, I do not expect a Hail Mary from Canberra. What I want is an Australian government that recognises the priorities of the Northern Territory. Our social challenges are investing in those things that closes the gap. We will get that under a Bill Shorten Labor government. This is not about begging, this is about fighting for what is fair for Territorians. We are part of Australia. We need a government that recognises that and invests in that. I know that we'll get that under Bill Shorten, supported by Warren Snowden, Luke Gosling and Malarndirri McCarthy.
So just to finish on that, let's face it, the CLP had an IMPEX party, and then when they were running out of money, they sold the TIO and the port, and they've basically left the Territory poorer than when they found it, with fewer assets. Everyone knew that IMPEX was coming to an end. The CLP did not prepare for anything except more debt for Territorians, and this is in the Liberal Party's DNA nationally. Did you know that since Abbott and then Turnbull, now the current fellow, got elected, that net debt for every Australian was about $9,000, net government debt. Now it's north of $21,000. This is classic Liberal Party stuff, and I'm worried this year they're getting so desperate, they're just going to spend the farm and leave nothing for anyone who comes after the next election. And they're doing it at a time when our economy is not as healthy as it should be. The reality is that our wages are flatlining, your power bills are up, your private health insurance premiums, if you can still afford private health insurance, are going up and up and up. The problem is this is a government who's out of touch, and the reason why they're out of touch in Canberra is the same reason that Michael Gunner inherited problems from the CLP in the Territory. They are chaotic and divided. They spent the whole summer focusing on themselves and not the people.